astronomers had long believed that our cosmos had always existed, eternal and unchanging. In its last version, the idea even had a name, the steady-state theory. But that was really just an assumption. And like so much received wisdom in science, it would ultimately be proved wrong by accident. The real Telstar satellite was built by AT&T, the phone company. Telstar was the first link in a truly global communications network. But there were a few bugs in the system, especially an annoying hiss in those early calls relayed by satellite.
Hello? Hello? Can you hear me? Hello? Hello?
AT&T engineers wondered if the problem might lie in the way Telstar communicated with Earth, using a form of energy called microwaves. Telephones are actually very simple machines. They all work in pretty much the same way. Hello?
Neil, it's your mom.
No, I'm kind of busy now. Can you call back later? Hang on a sec. What they do is they convert sound waves into electrical impulses, and then take those same electrical impulses and convert them back into sound waves at the other end of the line. I gotta go. I'm working here, all right?
Okay, then.
Let's talk later, but thanks for calling.
Love you.
Bye. Satellites take this one step further. They convert the electrical impulses into forms of light we call microwaves and radio waves. To get a handle on that, let me introduce you to my cosmic tuner. It's sensitive to all forms of light there are. Most familiar is visible light, with its rainbow of colors. What makes one color different from the next is simply its wavelength. And I can use this knob to tune one wavelength to the next. Let's start with violet. It has the shortest of all wavelengths. Moving to longer and longer wavelengths, we pass from one color to the next, right on up to orange, and then red. There ends visible light. But light continues beyond that. Just increase the wavelength. And what do you get? Infrared. Can't see infrared, but we feel it. We sense it as heat. Beyond infrared, we find microwaves. And then the longest of them all, radio waves. Both radio waves and microwaves we use to communicate through Earth's atmosphere and through space itself. As it happens, almost everything in the night sky emits energy in the form of these same micro and radio waves. Here is the Milky Way photographed in visible light. And here is its image at radio wavelengths. After World War II, this new way of looking at the sky launched the field of radio astronomy. And now, it would lead to a phenomenal discovery. Robert Wilson and Arno Penzias were both experts in the new fields of radio and microwave astronomy. And in 1964, AT&T's Bell Labs asked them to help figure out what might be causing the annoying hiss in satellite communications. To do so, they began their detective work with this giant antenna that could receive signals from Telstar. To test the instrument, they pointed it at an empty patch of sky. Aiming at nothing, they expected to find nothing. Instead, to their surprise, they picked up a faint microwave signal, apparently coming from empty space. Sure that couldn't be right, they looked for any possible source of stray microwaves. They even climbed into the horn to clean up after a pair of unwelcomed guests.
When's the last time we were in here? Yeah, 38 years ago.
65 or 64. There'd been a pair of pigeons living there and deposited pigeon droppings inside, and that was clearly a possible microwave loss material. As a graduate student, I did worse things. And you probably did too.
Yeah, you just do what you have to do. You do what you have to do every day. Probably best to plant your left foot.
Nothing worked. The hiss was still there. And mysteriously, it seemed to be coming from wherever they looked in the sky.
For heaven's sakes.
We could by then rule out that it came from the horn itself. We were unaware of anything in the sky that should do it, and we thought the horn should not be picking up anything from the ground. It just was sort of surreal. It didn't fit our idea of physics.
But the microwave hiss, so perplexing to Penzias and Wilson, did fit a radical idea being explored by a group of physicists just 40 miles down the road in Princeton, New Jersey. The Princeton team was trying to prove that our entire universe had actually been born in a tremendous burst of energy billions of years ago. Team leader Bob Dickey believed that some of that energy should still be detectable as a faint hiss of microwaves in space. To test that hunch, Dickey asked a young postdoc named David Wilkinson to set up this miniature antenna in his spare time.
We weren't in any particular hurry because Bob Dickey's idea was so original. We weren't too worried about somebody else getting there before we did. We went down to Arch Street in Philadelphia and dug around in the World War II surplus shops to find things that were cheap.
But before their instrument was up and running, word reached Penzias and Wilson, who gave Dickey a call.
He hung up the phone, and I'll never forget exactly what he said. These are his exact words. He said, "Well, boys, we've been scooped."
Scooped indeed to the greatest discovery in cosmology, the Big Bang. In the Big Bang, our entire universe, all the matter, all the energy that would ever exist, burst into being at a single instant. A flash of light filled the cosmos, and as the universe expanded, that light stretched with it to longer and longer wavelengths, through the visible range, to the infrared, until now. That flash of light remains as a faint glow of microwaves filling the entire sky. The glow that Robert Wilson and Arnold Penzias detected with this antenna.
Penzias and Wilson's discovery of the microwave background is what made cosmology a science.
It suddenly made you realize that history was being made. Here you were, and suddenly the universe, as understood by man, was different to what it had been like yesterday.
All of a sudden, you had data. And you really tested a theory. You had a theory that said the universe started with this hot Big Bang. And what Penzias and Wilson saw was this leftover heat from the Big Bang.
Their serendipitous discovery was so important, it won Penzias and Wilson the Nobel Prize.
The actual ceremony in Stockholm was kind of a blur. I never have quite gotten over the feeling of not being a grown-up, that other people are older, smarter, and so forth, and that I don't think that ever leaves.
When the Nobel Prize was announced, I think probably one of the first things I thought about was, do I really deserve this? And should my name be on the same list with Einstein? It just seemed completely wrong. Over the years, I guess, I've come to understand that the Nobel Prize is given for discovering something, not for being the smartest person around. So while there are much smarter people around, we did something significant, and I feel comfortable with it now.
Now that we know what to look for, it's not all that hard to detect the Big Bang. Take an ordinary TV set, the old-fashioned kind, before cable. All you need to do is change the channel until you come between two stations. Most of that static comes from stray local radio waves hitting these rabbit ear antennas. But amazingly, about 1% of the snow and noise comes from microwaves produced in the Big Bang itself. Right now, we're all eavesdropping on the birth pangs of the cosmos. The discovery of the Big Bang was revolutionary.